Night training disaster. 11 members of the U.S. military lost in an overnight helicopter crash near Pensacola, Florida. Gaining ground. Iraqi forces enter a key city controlled by ISIS as the U.S. considers its anti-terrorist options.
A Catholic bishop and a State Department official testifying here at the Senate on protecting religious freedom abroad. I'm Jason Calvi. I'll have that story coming up.
And the grace of old age. Pope Francis says society tends to discard the elderly. The Lord certainly does not. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, March 11th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. A search and rescue mission continues tonight off the Florida Panhandle after the crash of a Black Hawk helicopter. Wyatt Goolsby is here tonight with the very latest.
Brian, rescue crews are scouring an area near Pensacola, Florida, searching for any signs of 7 Marines and 4 Army aircrew that were on board the helicopter. But many fear those service members to be dead after crews are finding debris and human remains washed ashore. Dense fog, a misty rain, and darkness are hampering search efforts for the UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter off the Gulf Coast. Law enforcement and emergency crews have been working round the clock since the helicopter went missing in the fog during a training exercise around 8:30 last night. By 2 a.m., searchers started finding debris in the water near Eglin Air Force Base. Crews are still calling this a rescue mission, but top-ranking U.S. military officials are expressing their condolences.
Those who serve put themselves at risk both in training and in combat. And we will work with the services to ensure those survivors, or I should say their family members, will be well cared for.
Know that with me, our thoughts and prayers are with them and their families as the search and rescue continues.
Fog in the area reduced visibility to 2 miles or less when the chopper went missing last night. It remained so heavy this morning that search boats just offshore could be heard but not seen. Black Hawk helicopters have been used by the military in both Iraq and Afghanistan, helping to transport people and equipment. The Eglin Air Force Base regularly holds training exercises in and around the nearby beaches. 4 aircrew members on board belong to the Army National Guard unit out of Louisiana, prompting Governor Bobby Jindal to issue this statement today, saying, "Our guardsmen have fought courageously overseas in defense of our nation and here at home, and have protected what matters most during times of crisis. These soldiers represent the best of Louisiana, and we are praying for them and their families." This investigation is still underway, so there's no word yet on what exactly caused the helicopter to crash. One aviation officer I spoke with today said there are a number of factors that could lead to an accident, but the weather could have been a key factor. Brian?
Thank you, Wyatt Goolsby. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Iraqi soldiers enter the city of Tikrit. That's a key test in their battle against ISIS. Video shows troops and militia marching alongside Humvees. Explosions can be heard as smoke rises into the sky. Tikrit is about 80 miles north of Baghdad. It's one of the largest cities held by ISIS. The terrorists now control about a third of Iraq and Syria. The U.S. coalition is not yet involved in the Tikrit offensive. Congress hears testimony today from America's top military officer. He says Iran's support fighting ISIS is helpful, but he is concerned about what happens next if ISIS is defeated. Suzanne LaFranchi has more from Capitol Hill tonight.
Well, Brian, a Senate committee is considering the president's authorization to use military force against ISIS. And while much of today's testimony focused on the Islamic State, the panel was deeply concerned over Iran's role in battling ISIS and their ongoing negotiations with the Obama administration.
3 of America's top national security officials are urging Congress to sign off on the president's new war powers request.
It will demonstrate to our men and women in uniform, some of whom are in harm's way right now, that all of us stand unflinchingly behind them.
Senator Marco Rubio is one of 47 senators who signed a letter on Monday warning Iran's leaders that a pact with the Obama administration is non-binding. He worries about U.S. allies.
The way we've proceeded with our negotiations in Iran have impacted our trust level with these critical allies in this coalition.
Senator, that actually is flat wrong. They believe we are better off trying to prevent them from getting a bomb diplomatically first, providing, of course, that it actually prevents them from getting that bomb.
Obama's proposal would allow the use of military force against ISIS for 3 years without border restraint, while ruling out large-scale U.S. ground combat operations. Many Democrats oppose any further troop deployment, while some Republicans, including Senator Lindsey Graham, say a long-term permanent solution requires boots on the ground.
This is a generational struggle. It's going to take 4 deployed troops at some level, probably for the rest of my life, and it's going to require us to help people in the region who would fight back.
This latest hearing, however, may be an exercise in futility. It's been a month already since the president introduced his war plan. Privately, both sides are indicating there may be little chance for any action at all. Brian?
All right, Suzanne LaFranchi on Capitol Hill. We'll go back to the Capitol with Jason Calvi a little later. The Susan B. Anthony list accuses Democrats of putting abortion ideology first. Senate Democratic leader Harry Reid wants language on abortion removed from a human trafficking bill. Reid says the prohibition of federal funding for most abortions clause must go or the bill won't pass. Susan B. Anthony list President Marjorie Dannenfelser responded to Reid, saying, Minority Leader Reid is ignoring history and carelessly throwing victims of human trafficking under the bus in order to cater to the abortion industry. This is abortion politics at its worst. That's a quote from Marjorie. The Iowa Supreme Court hears arguments for and against telemedicine abortions. That means a doctor is not in the same room as a patient who receives an abortion-inducing pill. Planned Parenthood appealed limits placed on that procedure by the Iowa Board of Medicine. The Iowa Catholic Conference tells News Nightly it supports the board's limits, and members are praying for a good outcome in this case. Pope Francis urges the church to foster a joyful embrace and a fruitful dialogue between the young and the old. At his weekly general audience, the Pope says we should challenge a throwaway culture. Acknowledging his own age, Francis says that although society tends to discard us, the Lord certainly does not. The Holy Father reiterated that the prayer of grandparents is a great grace and gift for families and for the Church. The Vatican also announced today that Pope Francis will visit Rome's main prison on Holy Thursday. He will continue his practice of washing the feet of inmates, men from that prison and women from a nearby facility. Well, some experts are skeptical about Hillary Clinton's claims that she did not send classified information via her personal email. That's one headline from the New York Times today. It shows the mixed reaction to the news conference of Hillary Clinton yesterday. The former Secretary of State stuck closely to her talking points. She did not explain why she kept work emails on a private server at her home. It's good to have Sarah Westwood with us, an investigative reporter for the Washington Examiner, following this story very closely. I know you did some fact-checking on this. What did you find?
We absolutely did. We found that Hillary Clinton, she did not address whether or not she sought clearances for using a private email. She cited convenience of using one device as a reason why she used a private email, and it turns out she carries multiple devices, cell phones, iPads. There were just a number of inconsistencies in her hearing from yesterday.
Do you have any thoughts as to why she went this route? And she did say that she probably should have had a separate email, didn't she?
She did, and you know, it's impossible to speculate why, but effectively what it accomplished is that she is avoiding records preservation laws. She possibly is skirting Freedom of Information Act requirements. So there are a lot of complications to her using this private email besides a lack of transparency.
Is it common for officials to circumvent this transparency law?
No, it's actually not very common at all. You know, some of her defenders have brought up the fact that Colin Powell used email, private email in his time in office, but he certainly didn't have an elaborate system set up in his basement, and he also tangentially used a government email address. That just goes to show that this is totally unprecedented, that such a high-level official would skirt the law this way.
Watching Hillary Clinton yesterday, you wondered why she did that news conference at that place at that time. Is this whole thing going to hurt her run for the presidency, this presumed run as the Democratic nominee?
It'll absolutely hurt the launch of her campaign. You know, now she's launching her campaign on terms that are being dictated by her adversaries right now. She's on the defensive, not on the offensive. And ostensibly, this incident is going to speed up the timetable of her making an announcement, because every day that she's not running, she's more vulnerable to these types of attacks.
Is there any chance, do you think, that she will decide not to run based on this?
I don't think that this could stop her at this point. She's put in the legwork. She has a campaign apparatus ready to go. If she needed to announce today, presumably she could, because she has all of the pieces in place.
Sarah Westwood with the Washington Examiner, thanks so much for digging into that for us.
Thank you.
Coming up, chilling testimony in the suspect's own words presented at the Boston Marathon bombing trial. And President Francois Hollande supports a law that could lead to legalized euthanasia in France. Mortal sin says to God, I don't want you here. This is my house. There's no room for you. That's what mortal sin is, and that's why it's grievous. Wednesday wisdom from our own dear Mother Angelica from EWTN's Facebook page today. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday evening, March the 11th. I'm Brian Patrick. Archbishop Oscar Romero will be beatified in his native El Salvador May 23rd. The Vatican confirmed the date today. He was a vocal critic of human rights abuses of the repressive Salvadoran government. Archbishop Romero was martyred while celebrating Mass in 1980. U.S. senators hold a hearing on protecting religious freedom abroad. Jason Calvi is at the Capitol tonight with more. Jason?
Brian, for the first time, President Obama's new ambassador at large for international religious freedom is testifying in that role before Congress. He's joined by a Catholic bishop who says we can't forget the persecuted. Bishop Oscar Cantu of New Mexico met victims of ISIS in Iraq this year.
Children who saw family members either injured or killed in the violence of ISIS. The stories of families leaving their homes without anything, just the clothes on their back, essentially.
The bishop says the U.S. should resettle refugees who can't return home. He also says military action is acceptable, but underlying issues need to be dealt with. Rabbi David Saperstein, the U.S.'s ambassador at large for international religious freedom, gave testimony alongside Cantu. Saperstein highlighted the Islamic State's rampage on people of different faiths.
Shia, Alawites, Christians, Ismailis, Druze, Yazidis, Shabak, and others have faced mass killings, rape, forced conversions at gunpoint, kidnappings, crucifixions, and other atrocities.
The State Department official monitors religious freedom in 199 countries and puts out a yearly report on the topic. His position was not filled for several years under President Obama. One of the questions posed today, will the Obama administration bring up religious freedom while negotiating with Iran?
Iran is silently suffocating the church.
Brian, several senators brought up the issue of American pastor Saeed Abedini, who right now is in jail in Iran for his faith. Ambassador Saperstein says that this issue is being brought up, at least on the sidelines of nuclear negotiations. Brian?
All right, Jason Calvi at the Capitol tonight. Thank you. The MIT police chief testifies today at the Boston Marathon bombing trial. Chief John DeFava says he told Officer Sean Collier to be safe just about an hour before he was killed. Prosecutors say Johar Tsarnaev and his brother shot Collier trying to steal his gun as they ran from police and the FBI after the bombing. A note scribbled by the defendant while hiding in a boat was read to the jury on Tuesday. After Tsarnaev's capture, a Boston police bomb technician sweeping the boat for weapons and explosives discovered the note. Punctured by bullet holes and streaked with his blood, Johar Tsarnaev believed his dead brother had reached paradise. I am jealous of my brother, he wrote, explaining God's plan for him was to stay behind to shed some light on our actions. Tsarnaev references the Mujahideen. You are fighting me who looks into the barrel of your gun and sees heaven. How can you compete with that? And in his words, a possible motive. We Muslims are one body, he writes. You hurt one, you hurt us all. Tsarnaev's writings on the boat, arguably one of the most critical pieces of evidence in a trial with so much evidence. It's stored in a warehouse the size of 2 football fields. More than 30 witnesses in 4 days have testified so far, with potentially dozens more expected to take the stand. Judge George O'Toole Jr. dismissed court early Tuesday to see the boat firsthand, accompanied by lawyers from both sides. The judge is deciding whether prosecutors can show jurors cutout panels of the boat containing only Tsarnaev's writings, or whether Tsarnaev's lawyers will be able to show jurors the entire boat, bullets, blood, writings, and gore, for a more complete look into the mind of an admitted terrorist now fighting for his life. Advocates for patients react to a bill that would allow terminally ill patients in France to be heavily sedated until they die. The French Parliament is considering the bill amid a national debate over whether to legalize euthanasia. Dr. Kevin Fitzpatrick is director of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition International. He is joining us by Skype from Avignon, France. Dr. Fitzpatrick, would you explain the measure that the French Parliament is considering to sedate terminally ill patients and your take on it, please?
Yes, indeed. This is an extension to the law in France as it currently stands, which would give people who are dying the right to terminal sedation, which is that they will be sedated heavily, profoundly, which means that they would be all but unconscious until the point at which they die.
So they wouldn't be able to eat or drink, I would imagine, right?
Absolutely not. No, they would not be able to do that voluntarily and would have to be fed or hydrated by artificial means.
What is the climate there toward the end-of-life issues in France that a measure like this would even be considered?
Unfortunately, many people think that this is actually a very good thing because they see it as some kind of compromise between assisted suicide and euthanasia on the one hand, and something which is compassionate and less worrying than assisted suicide or euthanasia on the other. Unfortunately, what we know is that in Holland, the rise of the use of terminal sedation is actually now counted as euthanasia by the back door in some cases, and it's very, very worrying that France thinks that this is okay.
Where does President Hollande and his administration stand on the issue?
President Hollande is actually someone who is influenced by the death of his own mother, Nicole Hollande, in 2009, and has decided that this is the way forward. And as I said before, it is counted as being a sensible and rational move, which will take him out of the difficulties that surround the issues of assisted suicide and euthanasia. Unfortunately, I believe he is deeply mistaken, and there are deep flaws in the way forward that he proposes.
And very briefly, what is your organization, Euthanasia Prevention Coalition International, doing in response to this?
We are working with our French colleagues, and we will fight at every turn to enable people to understand and have an informed decision what the consequences of introducing any legalized third-party intervention at the end of anyone's life, what that brings, and that brings Holland and the horrors that we've seen in Holland and in Belgium in particular.
All right, the director of Euthanasia Prevention Coalition International, Dr. Kevin Fitzpatrick, joining us by Skype from Avignon. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're very welcome.
Up next, in a week set aside to honor women religious, we hear about some sisters who are building bridges in the church. And we show you a successful campaign to draw Catholics back to the confessional during Lent. From Pope Francis, I want to say one word to you, and this word is joy. Wherever consecrated people are, there is always joy. That message from Pope Francis to men and women religious. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick with the EWTN News Nightly team, and we're midway through National Catholic Sisters Week, an annual celebration specifically honoring women religious. Organizers say it's a chance to meet sisters, learn about their work, and be inspired by it. The National Catholic Sisters Week website features sister stories and information on events. People are also using social media, Pinterest, Facebook, and Twitter to thank sisters. This special focus on Catholic sisters continues through this Saturday. We're joined by Erica Cedrone by Skype from Boston, the director of Mission at Catholic Extension. That's an organization providing resources to poor mission dioceses in the U.S. Erica, tell us about the program that Catholic Extension is funding that brings sisters from Latin American communities to churches in the U.S. What's the goal of the program?
Yeah, it's an innovative program. It's a new program. It was launched this year with the help of the Conrad Hilton Foundation to bring 35 sisters to 11 mission dioceses across the United States to work in Hispanic communities in areas where their families and communities are under-resourced, and the need to have a connection to the church is very real. And many of these communities don't have that. So these sisters are there to build that up and to be that bridge.
And these sisters are known as bridge builders. Gente puente, the Latin phrase for that. How are they uniquely able to relate to the Hispanic community here?
Yeah, it's amazing. We've seen some amazing transformations in these communities when the sisters come in, and they are gente puente. They're bridge builders, connecting these communities, these families to the church. In many cases, back to the church, because some of these families have not had a connection in many years.
Can you share a quick story with us that would give us an idea of the impact the program's having?
Yeah, One that comes to mind is in Tyler, Texas, we had 3 sisters who were visiting and had wanted to go to KFC, of all places. They were excited to try American food. And when they had come in, one of the patrons had noticed the sister in habit and had asked for a blessing. And you could see in the restaurant it was contagious. Everybody stopped. Everybody was quiet. So their presence is felt in many, many ways.
And how is Catholic Extension honoring the Gente Puente sisters this week?
We're doing a lot. Catholic Extension has been celebrating sisters for over 110 years. So through a lot of our social media, #NunsRock. So we are highlighting stories every week about sisters who are doing amazing work in the diocese all over the United States.
So really, these sisters are the face of the church for people in these communities, aren't they not?
They are. Many of these families live in areas where it's so remote that there's very little connection to the church, let alone other families or communities. So to be able to bring them to the church, or for the sisters to go out to them, it's been an amazing. We've seen just the transformation it's made, not only the families, but in the sisters in the diocese.
A beautiful story, a great effort. We thank Erica Cedrone, Director of Mission at Catholic Extension, joining us by Skype from Boston this evening. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
And campaigning is very commonplace here in Washington, D.C. Tonight, Catherine Zeltner shares a different sort of D.C. campaign, drawing Catholics back to confession.
The 40 days of Lent are a chance to repent, but going to confession can be scary.
It's very intimidating for people, thinking it's not just about going to God, but actually, how do you go to God to receive this forgiveness?
That's why Cardinal Donald Wuerl launched the Light is On for You campaign nearly 10 years ago in the Archdiocese of Washington. The Arlington Diocese in Virginia joined a few years later. All parishes in these 2 dioceses offer confession every Wednesday evening during Lent. There are resources that break down how to give a good confession if it's been a while.
This year we would love to see long lines. That's one of our goals, long lines for confession. But a change of heart also comes with that.
Confession is at the heart of the campaign, but it's just a starting point. Father Christopher Pollard offers more during his Wednesday Holy Hour.
People love prayer, people love silence, people love music. They love to be able to go to confession, but they also like preaching. And even if the preaching isn't very good, they still want to have some preaching.
For the busy commuters in the D.C. area, the campaign is even being advertised on the Metro train.
Bringing back Catholics who have been away from the church back here into the confessional isn't as easy as handing them a few pamphlets, but the digital world is right at their fingertips.
The Light is On campaign is promoted heavily on social media.
We have to bring the gospel to the margins, and the digital sphere is a margin. That's where people are encountering messages from Christ, and then ultimately that digital encounter will bring them to the real encounter in the sacrament and in the church where he is.
But if you're not the savviest online, Father Bill Burns says you can still be a missionary the old-fashioned way.
The best invitation is to say, hey, I'm going this Wednesday night. You want to come along? And even just to say a prayer with me while I go to confession.
A way to open the door and show the light is still on for them. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. If you haven't been to confession in a while, come back. It's a great blessing. The website, thelightison.org, offers resources such as online videos to share with others. You can always sign up to have Lenten reflections sent by text to your cell phone. Similar initiatives are spreading across the nation. Thanks so much for joining us. Until tomorrow, with the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick, and we say goodnight with these special moments from today's general audience with Pope Francis. God bless you.